Welcome to State of Affairs. I'm Steve Adubato. We're coming to you from the Agnes Varus NJTV studio in beautiful downtown Brick City, Newark, New Jersey. We're honored to have Jeh Johnson, former Secretary of Homeland Security. It is an honor to have you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, private citizenship, head of Homeland Security, with all of that extraordinary responsibility for how many years?
I was Secretary for 3 years.
Wow. And before that,
1,124 days.
You know,
but I was not counting.
And before that, you had a previous job in the Obama administration?
Yes, I served as General Counsel of the Department of Defense in the first term of the Obama presidency. I left, came back home to Montclair, New Jersey, thought I was done, and then in August of 2013, the president asked me to join his cabinet. I was shocked. I had no idea that I would ever be Secretary of Homeland Security. It was a position I never aspired to, but I couldn't say no. And so I was nominated for the job in October 2013, confirmed by the Senate in December 2013, and I took the oath December 23rd, 2013, in our living room in Montclair, New Jersey, and went to work.
One of our other neighbors in Montclair, our great anchor here, Mary Alice Williams, has had you on many times on the news here. And for those who may have not picked up all of it in terms of what exactly that extraordinary job is, describe that responsibility.
Well, the Department of Homeland Security is 230,000 people, 22 components. It's the third largest department of our U.S. government, responsible for counterterrorism, cybersecurity, enforcement and administration of our immigration laws, port security, maritime security, aviation security through TSA, response to natural disasters through FEMA, protection of our leaders through the Secret Service. And there were days when I felt like I had a third of the federal government and two-thirds of the problems. So it was challenging. The nature of Homeland Security is we're on defense. And it's key that we always try to stay one step ahead. I used to tell my people, don't respond to and prepare for the last terrorist attack. Prepare for and try to anticipate what the next one's going to look like.
How did you sleep?
Not great. People always ask the Secretary of Homeland Security, what keeps you up at night? And I'd have to say a lot of things, but the thing that probably kept me up at night the most is the prospect of homegrown violent extremism, the so-called lone wolf who could strike in a place like San Bernardino or Orlando, Florida,
or on a bridge,
or West 23rd Street
Europe.
in Manhattan.
Yeah, right.
And
or in
it
Europe.
Is random.
Right.
Or in Europe.
You see that happen. Truck comes across a bridge. You don't know. Random. You don't know to connect it. Happening more and more. Like, how the heck do you and your colleagues, the experts in this field, how do you prepare for that?
Well, our intelligence community does a lot. Our intelligence community is far more robust and sophisticated than it was as recently as 15, 16 years ago, 9/11. We have the ability now to detect plots overseas at the earliest stages, and we interdict and prevent a lot that the public doesn't necessarily know about. We're challenged when it comes to the lone actor who self-radicalizes in secret in his own home, in his own garage. And what I used to tell the public when I was in office is public awareness, public vigilance is important too, because it is almost always the case that when someone self-radicalizes, there's somebody close to that person who sees the warning signs, you know, the ammunition stockpile in the garage, or certain types of suspicious behavior. And so part of Homeland Security.
Sorry for interrupting, Jay. Sorry for interrupting. What should we do when we see it?
There's law enforcement, obviously, state, local, or federal. But then there are other ways to intervene if you see somebody heading in the wrong direction, short of law enforcement, short of calling the cops. At an early stage, we can talk to young people about channeling their energy and their anger toward other things, toward more positive ways to bring about change. And so the other thing I did when I was secretary, spent a lot of time in American Muslim communities.
You sure did.
I visited just about every major metropolitan area with a significant Muslim population in this country to talk to American Muslim communities about helping us help them with individuals in their midst that ISIL or Al Qaeda might be trying to recruit. And to me, that's a fundamental part of our Homeland Security, that we continue that effort. I know my successor, John Kelly, believes in that mission, and I hope he continues that.
Is President Trump right or wrong in your opinion? Because you've said publicly, I believe you told Morning Joe on MSNBC that you thought he could be a great president. But is he right in continuing to want to figure out how to stop certain people coming into this country from certain countries seemingly because of their religious and/or ethnic background?
Steve, I think it's careful when you're dealing with Homeland Security not to always act on your first impulse. Sometimes the first reaction is not the best reaction. I used to tell audiences, I can build you a perfectly safe commercial flight, but you'll be wearing no clothes, you'll have no checked luggage, no carry-on luggage, no food, and no trips to the restroom. But it will be risk-free. But nobody would want to take that flight. And so Homeland Security is striking a balance between what's appropriate for basic physical security and preserving our values, preserving our freedoms, freedom to travel, freedom to associate, freedom of religion. We are a nation of immigrants, preserving immigration, preserving lawful immigration. And so it's always good to reevaluate. It's always good to reevaluate refugee screening, for example, in response to an evolving threat picture. But outright banning refugee resettlements, I think, is a mistake.
I'm sorry for interrupting again, Jay. This term extreme vetting mean anything to you?
Well, you know,
didn't you do that?
I was just going to say, I would say we have extreme vetting now when it comes to refugee resettlement. It takes something like 18 to 24 months per refugee to resettle one person in the United States.
So if the president says we need extreme vetting, you say?
We do a lot now. We really ramped it up on my watch over the last several years to better connect all the dots, consult multiple different law enforcement, intelligence community agencies about individuals before a person is approved for resettlement in the United States. There are a number of agencies with their fingers in this pie. State Department, Homeland Security, intelligence community, DOD, FBI are all looking at the threat picture. We're all involved in the vetting process now.
You sat down with President Trump. Was he president-elect at the time?
Yes, in December. In December, I met with him at Trump Tower.
To what degree did you find him that you can talk to us about? Curious, engaging, really wanting to understand?
In person, President Trump, then President-elect Trump, is a very engaging person, very charming, very outgoing. I called him to congratulate him on the nomination of my successor in December. He took the call, and he invited me to come up to see him at Trump Tower. And we met for 45 minutes. We talked about a range of subjects.
Just the two of you?
Just the two of us. And he was interested. He was curious. Now, I think that his presidency is very much a work in progress. He needs to fill out the political appointments across this administration. He's only appointed a small fraction of the people he needs to appoint.
So, devil's advocate, someone says, hold on, Obama did the same thing. How is it different?
Well, I think we moved at a somewhat faster pace. There are over 500 political appointments to be made. I think over 500 Senate confirmed, and at this point, he's still got only a fraction in there, and you have acting serving in the chairs, and so he needs an administrative team. I think he should take more opportunities to get a range of opinions from people, including outsiders, and be willing to listen to your staff and the advice you get once in a while. For example, I never put out a public statement of any type when I was secretary unless I showed it to at least 3 or 4 other people first. And very often I'd read something in the newspaper or online first thing in the morning, and I'd be livid, and I'd come to work, and I will have typed out my own public statement before 7 a.m., but before I would hit send, I'd invite 3 or 4 people into my office and say, here, I want to say this, and give them the opportunity to talk me out of it.
You wouldn't tweet at 4,
Or at
5, or 6?
very least correct the typos.
So, Mr. Secretary, you wouldn't tweet 4, 5, or 6 in the morning?
Afraid not.
Do you think there's a correlation, particularly when you're dealing with very sensitive issues regarding security, Homeland Security, that tweeting, something comes into your head and you want to say it in that moment, whether you're the head of Homeland Security or the head of the free world, President of the United States, that there's a degree of discipline and restraint that is essential?
Well, very often the first reaction is not the best reaction.
Okay.
Very often, on the other hand, you should be prepared to go with your own instincts. Right. That's why you were put in the chair in the first place.
I know we're going to this is tricky. Syria, what the president did in Syria with the 59 missiles that were sent, right thing to do?
I believe it was the right thing to do. I hope that this administration is now prepared to think through the second and third order effects of that strike. You know, where do we go next?
Got it.
So, but yes, I support the strike. This was a line that was crossed, and there needed to be action.
To help me on this, Jay, this is an extraordinary story, and I don't want to give it short shrift. Your grandfather was an intellectual, 40s and 50s, PhD, extraordinary man. Why is this relevant to this discussion, particularly as it relates to some who are being persecuted and treated horribly in this country? What was his story, real quick?
Well, I like to quote my grandfather often because so much of what he said then is relevant now. And he was active during the McCarthy era.
Right.
And during the McCarthy era, if you were a PhD intellectual African American who wrote about civil rights,
you were labeled.
Very often you were suspected of being a communist.
That's right.
So my own grandfather was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee to deny he was a member of the Communist Party. And it happened to be the House Un-American Activities Committee held its hearings in the same hearing room where I would testify as Secretary of Homeland Security some 65, 70 years later.
Yeah. The biggest lesson you take from that?
The biggest lesson is what I tell audiences all the time. We need to learn from history and not avoid the mistakes of history. Those who don't know history are bound to repeat the mistakes of history.
Jeh Johnson served as the Secretary of Homeland Security in this country and had the awesome, incredibly hard to imagine responsibility of protecting all of us with a great team. And I want to thank you for your service to this country and your work on behalf of all of us. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. State of Affairs. We'll be right back right after this.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the CAUCUS Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio at 2 Gateway. Funding has been provided by Summit MD Anderson Cancer Center, Delta Dental of New Jersey, Valley National Bank, St. Peter's University, New Jersey Resources, New Jersey Sharing Network, and by the North Ward Center.